So today our guest is Delshia Perry. Delshia, say hello to the people.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about just not to go too much into it, but just a little bit about who Hardel was?
Well, Hardel was my only child, born December 29th, 1990. Hardel was a very energetic young man, just full of love and joy, and brought a lot of that. He was a comedian. We used to say, you missed your calling because you truly were a comedian. He loved to make us laugh. He was very athletic. He played the drums when he was young. And I pretty much let him be exposed to whatever I thought he would want to get into: ice skating, basketball, football, baseball, you name it. I let him venture into it. And he kind of, gravitated towards basketball and played on a AAU traveling team for about a year and a half. And so he really enjoyed that. He was the point guard, and he really enjoyed that more so than football. But Hardel was the love of my life. He was, like I said, my only child, and he and I were best of friends. He was literally my ride or die. We did everything together. And unfortunately, in 2018, Hardel would find himself in the Beltrami County jail, where he would become sick and had fallen out of the bunk 3 days after being in custody. He called me crying and saying, "Mama, they don't believe me. They think I'm lying." And I called, as any mother would, to the jail, pleading with them to help him, do anything that they could to see what was the matter with him. And I remember speaking with one of the officers there and saying that if he is not coming to the phone and he knows his mama is on the other end, something is seriously wrong. And surely there was, because then we would later find out that Hardel was suffering what's called Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS. And it is where your immune system attacks your nervous system and you become paralyzed from the inside out. Now, Hardel walked into the Beltrami County Jail. I believe it was August 24th, 2020. Is incorrect, but somewhere in there. Healthy, fine, in pretty good spirits, considering he may have been facing a 3 or 5 year prison sentence. But again, we know that county jail is a holding place, and you are to be innocent until proven guilty. Well, Hardel never got his day in court. Hardel would succumb just 9 days after being in custody. He became paralyzed, and they left him on the floor for 6 days to suffer excruciating death. He ended up in pens, and they allowed him to just lay in his own urine and his feces for days after days. And this is all caught on video. I thank God for Unicorn Riot. They did a beautiful job. Nico and Georgia Fort came and took the story. And the videos that have been released through YouTube is how the public began to really understand the magnification, and the logistics of what really happened. And I thank God for them. And they've been following us to continue to share this story, because right now we're in a major lawsuit, and we still have not gotten any type of justice. No one's been fired. No one has been, licenses have not been revoked. The doctor in this case, Dr. Todd Leonard, and I don't even want to give him the title of doctor, because it just is inhumane what he did to Hardel, and what the staff in the Beltrami County Jail, the medical staff, did to Hardel is inhumane. They treated my baby worse than a dog. So he should not even be able to practice medicine right now, but he still is. And I don't understand why that is. Why isn't the attorney general or whoever the hires that be that have that authority to step in and say, we've seen enough evidence, let's make something happen. And still nothing's happened. And we are 3 years later and still no one has been held accountable.
Right.
And Hardel was murdered. He was medically neglected, but he was abused in that they would not allow him basic medical care. And 6 days later, he would succumb. And I understand that GBS is very treatable. He should be here today. Hardel should be here today. And now we don't have, my best friend is gone. His 3 little girls don't have a father. His aunts don't have a nephew. His uncles don't have a nephew. Cousins are without another cousin. His friends have lost a very dear friend. He is greatly missed. Greatly missed. But that's kind of the back, just kind of leading up to where we are now with the passing of the Hardel Sherrel Act. But just to give your audience some background.
And which is a major, major, major accomplishment. I want to take a quick listen to a clip and get your feedback on it.
Okay.
Pizza.
Hold on 1 second. Let's get through that.
Mm-hmm.
With a unanimous bipartisan vote from a committee of the Minnesota House, as AJ Legault reports, there to have their voices heard.
Thanks to the investigative reporting of Kara Levin's Cruel and Unusual series,
state lawmakers heard emotional testimony from families featured in Kara Levin's investigation of needless deaths in Minnesota jails, including the mother of Hardel Sherrel, who died on the floor of the Beltrami County Jail after days of increasing paralysis. Well, jailers thought he was faking.
And they just left him there on the floor, crying out for help for days, not minutes, days, until he took his last breath.
Oh my God. They also heard about Brett Huber Jr., who had a psychotic break, even climbing atop a semi in the middle of the interstate. Taken to jail, still obviously disturbed, he didn't get any mental health care for nearly 3 months.
He remained without a psychiatric evaluation or any mental health treatment until he hanged himself on his cell on June 9th.
I can't stress enough, members, that this is a crisis.
Corrections Commissioner Paul Shea supports the proposed reforms, including requiring independent reviews of medical and mental health care and more state authority to take action against troubled jails. After more than 50 deaths in the past 5 years, families say the reforms are desperately needed and lives are at stake.
This bill must be made about saving lives and preventing senseless deaths.
For Kara Levin Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
And that was Delshia Perry testifying in front of the House and some Senate members in Minnesota. What was it like testifying about a bill named after your son that you know would have saved his life and could save lives in the future?
Well, it was very heart-wrenching because I was pleading for them to understand the magnification of, yes, I've lost my only child. What can we do moving forward to make Minnesota jails safer for those that may end up incarcerated? And there are people right now that are incarcerated and they're innocent. And it happens a lot. And it doesn't matter why a person is incarcerated. The fact that they're there, they should be able to go in, and if found guilty and are convicted, let them pay their debt to society unharmed. So when I went to go do the second testimony, which was on Mother's Day, it was very difficult. I was very emotional because it was Mother's Day, of course. But I knew I had to press on. I knew that people had to hear my voice to push for this legislative change. Because as you heard AJ Legault with KARE 11 News, the reporter there, say that 50 investigations have come out of a result of me pushing for change. 50 new investigations, that's a lot.
That's
So
a
there
lot.
are names, yes, there are names of people I don't know who have died behind bars. We're just talking about in the state of Minnesota now. But I had to do something, particularly when I kept hearing that there were other deaths within the Beltrami County Jail. And I said, my son's death is not an isolated death. It's not an isolated incident. There's a pattern and it keeps happening. And why is this a pattern at this particular jail? Not to mention there are other jails that also have these same patterns. So I began to kind of look into that and, go back and forth and talk to AJ. And I'm like, well, who's overseeing these jails? And that's when all of this became exposed. And AJ did an amazing job to find out that it is actually Mend Medical. And Dr. Todd Leonard, who owns this private company called Mend Medical. And they certainly aren't providing any medical. So I'm just praying now that where we are at, that Mend will come to an end, because they don't need to have that kind of access. 45 county jails, they oversee 45 county jails. That's a lot of lives. We can't afford another one. We can't afford even one more life to be lost at the hands of men.
And talking about Mend Medical, could you talk about the whistleblower nurse that came forward in Hardel's case and how that really just shed light on some of Dr. Leonard's practices?
Yeah, well, I like to read. I know her now. I have become good friends with her, and she is also on my board. So I prefer to not call her the whistleblower, if you will, but just somebody who wanted to do the right thing and knew the wrong thing had happened and was devastated by it, and said that if she didn't speak up and say something, she wouldn't be able to rest. And with her coming out with that information, Stephanie did a huge justice for all lives in the matter of Mend Medical. And I'm just hopeful, and I pray that with the hearing that just recently happened, we've got maybe another 30 plus days to hear the outcome of that. And I pray that her part in that and the information that she's shared with the public in her statement, that what Dr. Todd Leonard didn't do, not what he did do, but what he didn't do, he will be held accountable for. So that is my prayer. And I do believe that in just 30 days or plus, because they have 90 days, the medical board has 90 days to come out with their findings. And I cannot accept anything less than a guilty or whatever whatever they have to do. A license revoked is what I'm praying for, because he should not be able to practice medicine anymore, anywhere for that matter, let alone Minnesota. But yes, it shouldn't be a slap on the hand. It certainly shouldn't be a suspended license. We've already dealt with Dr. Todd Leonard with a suspended license, and that didn't do any good, because if that was the case, Hardel would be alive. Najee Khan Powell, Tony May Jr., Bruce Lundmark, Michael Bellinger, Stephanie Butler, the Huber family, and whoever else that Dr. Todd Leonard had an oversight on that county jail. Mend Medical needs to come to an end. And let me just correct myself. Najee Khan Powell died in the Hennepin County Jail, unfortunately, but that was not a Mend Medical situation there. But all of the other names that I've mentioned are a Mend problem. Yeah, men needs to come to an end. Absolutely.
So let's talk about definitely men needs to come to an end and Dr. Leonard needs to be held accountable. Let's
Yes.
talk about the passage though
Yeah.
of the Hardel Sherrel Act. Just real quick. What are some, I think it calls for it ends chokeholds in jails and facilities. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Well, you know what? There are several things that the Hardel Sherrel Act has done and will do. Well, first of all, of course, it will keep incarcerated people safe and save lives for decades. That's the big thing, right? The bill would also require all correctional facilities to provide a release of information form to individuals upon intake, allowing them to authorize information to those in custody for like health reasons and so on and so forth, should someone become incapacitated, like in the case of Hardel. So that's a big deal. Well-being checks will be done properly, and documentation of that will be done properly. The watchers are now being watched, if you will. Okay, and of course, as you said, the use of force. There will be no chokehold. There will be no prone restraints, tying up of all a person's limbs and tying them behind their back. To render the person immobile. There won't be any of that. Duty to report. If an employee is working at a facility and observes another employee, doing neglect or seeing them, using excessive force, or that they're neglecting another inmate, they are obligated to report that to the jail administrator within 24 hours. And a staff person who fails to report neglect or excessive use of force within 24 hours is subject to disciplinary action. And what all that means, I'm not sure. But this bill has now given the DOC and Paul Schnell more authority to pretty much revoke licenses and hold evildoers, in this case, accountable. And that's what we're looking for right now. We're looking for some accountability moving forward. Code of conduct policy is another one that they've put in place. Death review teams. They've actually come up with teams to do death reviews. And they must be reviewed within 90 days upon the death by an outside agency, by a medical expert or a mental health expert or what have you. So they're not doing their own reviews as they once were. The bill gives the commissioner, as I said, a lot more authority to do things where before his hands were kind of tied in the things that he could and couldn't do. Well, this now clarifies all of that. And we've talked about this before, Trahern. The statutes have not been changed in over 115 years until we got on board, and I would not continue to take a no for an answer that no, we couldn't change anything. We had to change, had to come. It was overdue. And
100 years.
Over 100 years, statutes have not been changed. And now
say that one more time, just so people can understand what that means.
Yes.
That those jail laws in Minnesota had not been changed in over 100 years. And the work you just did.
Yes.
Just changed that.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And the bill, I'm just giving just bits and pieces of it, but it's huge. There's a lot there. And people want to go in and kind of look at what's going on. I think that I would absolutely advise people to, do their own research. One other thing I just want to make mention of too is the discharge plan. Before, they would just let people out of the jail and be like, oh, well, you know what? You're released. Go ahead. Now they couldn't do that anymore without having a discharge plan. And by that, I'm talking about, say, for example, somebody has mental health issues or medication that they needed. They're not going to let them out and be like, you're out of here, and then for them to commit the same crime or, become addicted all over again or, to relapse or whatever it might be that they're dealing with, alcoholism, drug abuse, whatever it might be, they now have to have what's called discharge planning in place before they are able to let them back out into the public and, in the society with the same issues. Because what happens is they get caught up and they go back into the system. Well, with this bill, we're trying to help them to get out and stay. We don't want them to keep going in and out. We are trying to do everything that we can to help reduce the rate of recidivism. And I will continue to do everything that I can with God's help, of course, and his leading me, to assure that now this law is upheld and that these measures are being, taken seriously, and the work is really being done. So now the work really begins. Now I got to roll up my sleeves and dive in with the DOC and other partners that we are working currently to make sure that this bill is what it's going to do, what it says it's going to do.
And what about that is excellent. What about the part about, so a part that really affected Hardel was the well-being checks.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that has changed now?
Yeah. A lot of what I've talked about affected Hardel, but yes, you're absolutely right. Because they thought he was faking it and they just left him in there. 8 hours on the floor, one incident. He fell out of the bunk and they left him lie face down on the floor for 8 hours. They didn't bother to do any well-being checks. What they may call, or what they may have called a well-being check, was just glance in the window and keep walking. And I don't even think they did that much. But the truth will come out. Well, we know we didn't, but the truth will come out. And now you have to, that doesn't count as a well-being check. You just glance in the window and keep going. That's not acceptable. They have to literally go in there and check for life and see that the person is alive, and check for their pulse or heart rate or whatever. They have to literally go in and check on that person before they can document that a well-being check was done. And in Hardel's case, he was in what's called the medically segregated part of the jail. So he should be getting even extra care. They normally check on people 30 minutes. I think they said that he should have been checked on every 15 minutes because he had come back from the hospital, but that wasn't done. So a lot of people have to do a lot of answering, not only to me and to the community, but they got to answer to God.
That's
and
right.
Yeah, and I pray that if they don't know God, that they would come to know God, because only he can forgive them of their sins and what they've done. I personally have had to forgive everyone because I am a woman of God, not to them, but to me. Because if I didn't forgive them, it would have eaten me up. I wouldn't be able to stand here right now and tell you what's happened, my truth and my pain, without falling apart and without stroking out and without having a heart attack or some other issues. But it is the grace of God that has kept me in this position to be a strong voice. That is why we started Be Their Voices. And as you know, with Be Their Voices, we advocate for those that are incarcerated, that have experienced neglect, abuse, mistreatment, and unfortunately death. And we're praying that will come to a halt or be eliminated altogether with Be Their Voices. And
Yes.
I believe, Karen, that with Be Their Voices and the community's voices together, we can make real change.
Indeed, and that we will make real change. I
Yes.
want to read a quick piece from the Trahern Tribune. Governor Tim Walz, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, and Corrections Commissioner Paul Schnell met with Delshia Perry to mark the recent passage of the Hardel Sherrel Act, named for her son who died after medical neglect while in Beltrami County Jail in 2018. Perry helped lawmakers craft the new legislation. We have a crisis situation in our state, and we desperately needed reforms to save lives, Schnell said. People are held in custody for a wide array of reasons. It shouldn't be a death sentence because of a failure to provide basic levels of care. The new law requires minimum standards on mental health, suicide prevention, and other health policies at the Department of Corrections. It also sets up a process for revoking facility licenses when they are deemed unfit for the use and mandate audits and death review teams. The legislation, which passed during the June special session, also limits how use of force can be applied in correctional facilities. For true reform and to keep our communities safe, we need to be able to hold people accountable when they fail in their duty to protect those in their care and custody, Walz said. How do you feel about that?
Yes,
what you just heard?
Yeah, you know what? He said it. It's in writing. We need to hold them accountable. And until that happens, we got to keep going. We got to keep fighting. We got to keep doing whatever we need to do so that our voices are heard for all of these families. And, you know, something else just needs to happen right now. With the Attorney General, I don't know. The FBI is investigating our case. The DOJ is investigating this case. And I have an excellent attorney, Attorney Zoroslav Leiderman, who has been doing an amazing job. And then, of course, I got to thank you because you kept pushing me to not give up. And I thank you personally, Trevor. It's my brother and somebody who's in the movement and understands what the fight is all about. But yes, it was good to hear the governor say those words. For the Department of Correction to say those words, it's like, okay, you know what? Everybody has seen the evidence. Let's get some accountability moving forward now. So I don't know if I maybe need to make a call to the AG. I don't know who I need to call, but we will be getting something done fairly soon because we need to hold folks to the law. They need to. Anybody else commits murder, what happens? Look at Derek Shot. He's in prison now where he needs to be. So come on, we need to hold wrongdoers accountable. And in this case, there are a plethora of them. And I think we need to start with the with the county jail, the jail administrator. I can't remember Calandra Allen, and then of course the Dr. Todd Leonard. Who I don't even want to call him doctor because he doesn't deserve the title of doctor. But yes, they all need to be held accountable. Absolutely.
And now that the Hardel Sherrel Act is law, hopefully those type of things won't continue to happen inside Minnesota jails. Let's talk about your organization, Be Their Voices. Why did you start that? What does it plan to do?
Yes, well, I started it because I realized that I had to be Hardel's voice. And then when we were talking about other people that had lost their lives in custody, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to be their voice too. I got to be their voices too. And that's how, through me and a pastor friend, talking it out, we came up with, wow, we both looked at each other and were like, oh, that's the name of it, Be Their Voices. So we were on the way with one of my granddaughter's moms. We were on the way up to Beltrami County to do an action when we came up with the name of Be Their Voices. But of course, it came out of the loss of losing my only child, and all of these other families that have been hurting the loss of their child. And if I can, I support a lot of the families that are a part of Be Their Voices, like Naja Khan Powell, who died in Minneapolis, Tony May Jr., who died in the Beltrami County Jail. Bruce Lundmark, who we know got very ill in Beltrami County Jail, but then they later sent him to Clearwater, where they tried to cover it up.
Mm.
He should have not been sent from Beltrami County Jail. He should have stayed in Beltrami County Jail and then sent to the hospital. But they say that there was overcrowding and he had to be sent to another jail. Well, we know that when he got to that other jail, he dropped dead. So that's a lie from the pit of hell. But Michael Bellinger, who died years later, but suffered and was in the Beltrami County Jail years prior to Hardel being there. But when he heard about what happened to Hardel, he wrote up a long letter and trying to expose Beltrami County, saying they need to be investigated and how terrible they treat people. And just yeah. So, and then of course he passed 7 days after Hardel passed in the same year. It was just unbelievable. And then of course Stephanie Bunker, another inmate in the Beltrami County Jail, and Huber in all of these other counties and all of these other people whose names we don't even know yet. But yet, this bill, if I can show it real quick, it is in honor of all those whose lives were taken and stolen behind bars. So I could not accept this, except that these families get recognized for their loss as well. So even though it's in Hardel's name, it represents all those names that I just mentioned to you.
That's right.
So yes, we are about advocating for those incarcerated. I get calls all the time. I get emails. I get people come on my Facebook, inbox me saying they need help. Can you? And then I've called. I do what I need to do. First, I pray. Before I do anything, I pray. And then I start making the calls necessary for change. And we do what we need to do. And then things have subsided once the call was made to me. And I thank God. I give God the glory for that. So yeah, Be Their Voice is here to stay, and we will continue to be the voice for those that are incarcerated to help keep them safe.
There's a celebration, and we're excited about Be Their Voices.
Yeah.
We'll come back so you can give people the information about how to get in contact with Be Their Voices. But there's a celebration of the Hardel passage of the Hardel Sherrel Act this weekend. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and I'm just so elated that the Soundgarden is allowing us to have it over there. Tremaine, well, his name is Harry Beaufort, but we know him as Tremaine because we go way back. We're like family. But he's allowing us to have it over at the Soundgarden at 772 Selby Avenue in St. Paul. And we are just honored to be able to hold that space and, of course, part of the street there for the event on October 2nd. At 2:00 in the afternoon till about 5-ish. And we're just really excited to be able to celebrate this victory. And we've had a lot of fighting and we've done a lot of crying, tears of sorrow. And, you know, it comes and goes for me as it does the families. But this is something that we can say, you know what, this is tears of joy. You get to celebrate something instead of always out here fighting and protesting and rallying and doing all of that. And I just want to quick say, I thank God for all the activists in the community that have lifted up my son's name, that have lifted up the other families' names and continue to do so and have done so from the very beginning. And I cannot thank them enough for just being there and supporting us in all of this because it has been very hard. Black Lives Matter, of course, you guys have been there for me. And, you know, from the very beginning, 5 days after Hardel's death, I saw a memory on Facebook. I was like, we went out 5 days later. I can't believe it. I'm like, wow, 5 days later. So, you know, I thank God for a lot of the activists that have been putting out news reports in the newspaper and just on the radio and talking about Be Their Voices and Hardel and the other families. You know, we just want our voices to be heard. And as I said earlier, with Be Their Voices and your voices, we will make real change because those voices will be heard.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And just really still, I've been watching you stand up, fight for justice for Hardel. It took a lot of courage to do that and to stand up and fight and get this legislation passed. During the George Floyd rebellion, there was legislation passing around the country, and not a lot of legislation was coming out of Minnesota. I believe the Hardel Sherrel Act and some of the legislation we passed here around reparations and possibly Brooklyn Center were the only really transformative pieces of legislations to come out of the George Floyd rebellion here in Minnesota. So I'm really glad that you kept your pushing and pushing and pushing and not giving up and made that breakthrough to get that piece of legislation passed that's going to save lives. If people want to get in contact with you or they want to reach out to Be Their Voices, how can they go about doing that? Or if they want to talk to you about Be Their Voices, etc.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, we have a website up and it is called Be Their, THEIR, voices.org. And you can, of course, go on and contact us through email on the website. We also have our telephone number there as well, 612-875-9559. And we can be reached in email at betheirvoices27@gmail. Again, that's betheirvoices27@gmail. And then, of course, we're on Facebook, Be Their Voices MN on Facebook. So please give us a shout out. You know, call us up if you have questions, concerns about a loved one that may be dealing with some of the things that you heard me talk about in Hardel's case. God forbid that it would go that far, but we want to make sure it doesn't matter what is happening. We want to hear from you so that we can stand alongside of you and expose that jail and expose those workers for their evil doing. So we want to make sure that your voices are heard. So please reach out. We're here to help in any way that we can. And I'm always open for prayer. So if anybody out there, needs prayer, I'm certainly up for that, as I am an evangelist and love to pray. So yes, thank you so much.
No doubt. Thank you for coming on the show tonight. We're real glad to have you. Please come back and give us updates about any work that Be Their Voices is doing and any updates in Hardel in the Hardel Sherrel case.
I sure will. Thank you so much. And yes, stay tuned for us going into the jails because we're working on jail curriculum and we're kind of getting the team together and we're kind of collaborating with some other partnerships on that. So yes, that is what's to come. So stay tuned. Be Their Voices is here to stay. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you.
Peace.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
And that was Shea Perry talking about the passage of the Hardel Sherrel Act, which was signed into law by Governor Tim Walz. They had a special ceremony about a week or two ago to commemorate the passage of the Hardel Sherrel Act. So we'll be celebrating that this Saturday, October 2nd. And this is the organization right here, Be Their Voices, founded by Shea Perry, the mother of Hardel Sherrel, who just got the passage of the Hardel Sherrel Act passed into law. We'll be celebrating this Saturday at the Selby Sound Garden, 772 Selby Avenue, about 2:00 starting. There's going to be food, music, rallying, and just lifting up all the families of stolen lives who have lost lives inside Minnesota jails or any jail here in America. Also this week coming up, right here at the same YouTube channel, we'll be talking about white supremacy and institutional racism in Hastings, Minnesota. We'll also be discussing this Thursday at the Selby Soundgarden from 4 to 6 p.m. We have the St. Paul School Board Candidate Forum. And then Saturday, we'll be at the Selby Soundgarden for the celebration of the Hardel Sherrel Act. And again, there'll be music, food, live entertainment, raffles, etc. Activities for our youth. If you haven't yet, go to www.stpaulrecoveryact.com and take the reparations survey today. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Trahern Crews Show. Keep it locked right here to 94.1 FM, Frogtown Tuned In Radio. All right, peace.